All right. So one of the most common questions that I get is either from people who are wanting to get into the trade, wondering how to find a good job or how to get into the trade in the first place, or people who are looking to hire people but have struggled finding skilled people to bring into their organization. So they want to know, how do you find good people? This is something that I've made a lot of mistakes in. I've learned a lot along the way. I've hired hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've had to let many people go as well. And the pain of that has informed the process that I suggest. But before we get into the hiring and firing part of things, I want to start with the how to get into the trade question. And my suggestion would be to, first of all, have a lot of clarity. Most people who are interested in working with me aren't really clear about what they want to do. And then when I pose questions to them, they don't really have answers to those questions, which is somewhat understandable because obviously if you've never been in the trade, you don't know what you don't know, and that's fine. You need to have a little bit of guidance, a little bit of understanding before you get started. And those are things that you can certainly do. So first off, know a little bit about yourself. Are you more of a hands-on person where you want to work on projects, maybe more of a craftsman type of worker? Do you enjoy solving complicated puzzles, which is more of a technician type mind? Or do you have scheduling restrictions? Are there things that you are and are not willing to do? Do you have any sort of physical limitations? You have to be really clear about those things because it's not going to help you if you get a job and then you're not able to do the thing that you were hired to do, or you find that you don't enjoy it. And this is something that I see happen a lot, even when I have these full conversations. And so it's really helpful that you have that clarity first. The next thing I would suggest is go out and find some companies that you think you would want to work for. First, figure out what segment of the industry you want to work in. Do you want to work in industrial or commercial? Maybe you want to work in market refrigeration. Maybe you want to do chillers primarily. Maybe you want to do residential or light commercial or refrigeration. There's a lot of different segments to our business, and you being really clear on which one of those you want to work in is going to be really helpful in you going out and finding a company that is going to be a good fit. Once you've identified the company that you'd like to work for based on the type of work they do and maybe their reputation, I would suggest doing things like looking up their online reviews, looking at their Glassdoor or their Indeed reviews from prior employees. Those are going to be things that will help you kind of get a sense of whether or not it's an organization you want to work at. Again, take a lot of that with a grain of salt. One review does not a bad company make or break, but you want to think about that when you're considering an organization. Then I would suggest calling the organization and asking to speak to the service manager or installations manager, projects manager by name. Go on LinkedIn, figure out who that is, have a sense of maybe who their customers are and the type of work that they do. And when you ask to speak to them, say that you need some advice on what it would take to work in the trade or potentially work for their company. I find that in general, asking for advice is a really good way to get your foot in the door rather than automatically saying that you want to apply for a job. A lot of people are interested in helping people get into the trade, but they know that there's a lot of applicants out there who aren't really serious. And so asking for advice is a good way to do that. Now, that's not going to work with everybody. And you can maybe try a multi-tiered approach. You can apply online, those sorts of things, but just recognize that if you've got no experience or very little experience, you've got to do some things that are going to help you stand out. And one of the best things you can do is to be somebody who's open-minded and a good listener. Also, you want to know a little bit about the kind of glossary of terms for that particular segment of the industry. And you can find those easily by watching some YouTube videos, going on my website. That doesn't mean that you're going to actually know what you're doing, but at least you'll know some of the terms and what those terms mean when you're having a conversation, and that will be very helpful. Even when you're asking questions, you want to be able to ask questions on the basis of, knowing what a compressor is, what an evaporator coil is, or what a case is. Those sorts of things are going to help you have that conversation and sound like you've put a little bit of the work in. And then when you get somebody on the line, don't start by talking about yourself. Talk about what they need and the sorts of people that they're looking for and what makes an ideal candidate for them, because that's not going to be the same for every company. And every company is not going to be hiring for the same sort of position. So you may need to start doing projects work or pipe fitting or whatever in order to get started in that business. And I think for most of you, that's going to be a good thing. That's not something you should downplay. Starting in the trade where you're doing a little bit more of the hands-on, even if you are working more towards the technical, is a really good attribute and is a sign of your commitment, but also is going to give you the opportunity to develop some skills and some knowledge that you're going to be able to draw from later on. So don't be afraid to kind of get started in some of those more basic things. In terms of what you look for in an organization, again, we mentioned that you want to look for companies that have a good reputation, but also look for companies that have a fairly structured training program. And your best bet is to talk to somebody who's been through a training program rather than just trusting the marketing that comes from a company. Because honestly, my take on this is that you can have a really nice looking process, but if the training and the hands-on doesn't represent that same process, so for example, if you're learning something in class and then you're going out in the field and it's completely different than what you're learning in class, then is that class really valuable? And so those are commonly things that kind of break or are deal breakers as far as education, is that there isn't a harmony between what you're learning in class and what you're learning in the field when you're working with your journeyman. So in terms of summary, know the companies you want to work for, know the type of industry you want to work in, know the vocabulary that goes along with that industry, and then ask questions rather than just talking about yourself, and use the term, I'm looking for some advice, is a really good way to get started with an organization. You may have to try several before you find somebody who's willing to take that phone call with you, but my guess is that if you have a good conversation with somebody, it's likely they're going to offer you a job just as part of that conversation. Now, in terms of organizations doing hiring, first thing that I would say is in our trade, we have to focus less on hiring skilled people who already know how to do it and focus more on hiring people who have the attributes that we can then train to do it. And so if you're not a training organization, if you're not an organization that takes training really seriously, then I would first suggest taking a good long look in the mirror and doing that. And that doesn't mean that you have to set up some curriculum or hire somebody who's a full-time classroom trainer. It just means that you have to really make sure that the field is doing a better job of training, and they're not teaching bad habits. They're being patient. You are sending people with people who are good trainers, even if they may not be your top technicians. Because that's one thing that we find often, is that sometimes the very best trainers aren't necessarily the most productive technicians because they have to take time teaching that new tech, and often their processes are maybe a little bit more thorough than some of the people who put out the best numbers. And so you don't want to have a culture that is this race to the bottom where you take, new apprentices or you take new helpers, you throw them in a truck with somebody and they end up just carrying tools and they're not getting their questions answered. First, be a training organization. Second, I suggest having a very thorough process. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but my suggestion is that you start with an online application process that has them answer some basic questions, some basic open questions, things like, especially if you're hiring for people who aren't technically skilled, it would be things like, what are some projects that you've worked on recently that you're proud of? What makes you think you would be good at this particular job? I ask a lot of imagine questions just to see if they have a good sense of what they're getting into. For example, what do you imagine the job would be like? Then once they go through that process, maybe give them a mechanical aptitude quiz if you have the ability to do that. Sort based on that information, make sure that they fill out all the information. People who leave fields blank is a really good indication of the type of person you don't want to hire. Once you find some people that look like good candidates, then set up some quick online interviews, 10, 15 minutes. I use Calendly and I force them to schedule themselves on my calendar. So I set open spots and then they have to schedule themselves on my calendar. It's just an extra step that shows, are they really serious about it or not? Once they get on my calendar, then I do that in-person interview. And most of the questions that I ask are open questions that are designed to challenge the applicant to see if they're going to become negative, if they're going to give answers that aren't thorough. An example would be, tell me a little bit about previous places you've worked and what you've enjoyed or haven't enjoyed. That gives them an opportunity to be positive about previous employers and what they've learned those places, which is what you're looking for. If they go straight to the negative side of things and they start especially saying names or calling out past jobs, then you definitely want to stay away from it, regardless of how plausible their argument sounds, regardless of if it sounds like they were really done wrong in the past. Trust me when I say, from personal experience, that if you hire somebody who's complaining about their past employer, they're going to turn around and complain about you. And then when it ends, it's going to end ugly. I've had this happen a couple times with people that I thought I could trust or thought I knew. And it just ends up that negative people are negative people wherever they go. And it's not something that most of us want in our organizations, regardless of their technical skill or ability. That's a big thing that I give people an opportunity for. I never ask them to talk bad about their previous employers because then that would be leading the witness. I just give them the opportunity to do so by asking open questions. For example, I'll say things like, what are some personality types or traits that you've enjoyed working with in the past? And once they answer that question, and if they can answer that question, hopefully they can, then I'll say, are there any personality types or traits that you haven't enjoyed working with. The right answer here is not one answer. It's not, oh, I enjoy working with everybody. I would prefer people to say an answer, but an answer that's ambiguous. It's not pointing at anyone in particular. Some of the best answers I've heard are things like, I find that I don't enjoy people who don't take their work seriously, or I don't enjoy working with people who are overly dramatic or bring their drama to work. Those are good answers because that helps identify a person as a non-dramatic person, as somebody who is work focused. What I'm looking for when I hire somebody is I want to know, do they have the basic attributes that are going to make them good at the job? And do they take work seriously? That's what I call relationship to work. Do they have a relationship to work where the work itself matters? They want to do a good job, or is work an opportunity to collect a paycheck and have social time? A lot of people who have this sort of social time motivation, they don't recognize that they do it. They get into a situation and they think that they care primarily about the work, but they're the ones who are walking around the office chit-chatting. As a technician, they're the last ones who want to leave the warehouse. They're the ones who are on the phone all day talking to other technicians about all kinds of random other stuff. There's nothing wrong with being friends with the people who you work with or enjoying, sharing about your personal life when it's appropriate, but that cannot be a primary motivator. If people's primary motivator is the social aspect of work, then that's going to come back to haunt you at some point, whether it's efficiency or drama or whatever the case may be. And this is even true of people who are not highly negative people, at least on the face of it, because eventually, given enough time and enough talking and enough chit chat, things will go wrong. So I look for people who have, again, if they're going to be a technician, basic mechanical aptitude skills, have good people skills, but also enjoy doing the work. They take the work itself seriously. Once I get through that process and I pick some of my top candidates in that Zoom call or whatever you want to use, Google Hangouts or however you want to talk to them, I do like the face-to-face because it gives me a chance to see their body language when I'm talking to them. Then I'll set up some in-person interviews. I generally try to do those with more than one person so that I can get another take. A lot of times I'll miss things about people that somebody else will catch on to. And we'll do that in-person interview, and I'll ask a lot of open questions. Once again, same sort of thing. Tell me about your previous work. Tell me about what you enjoy. Tell me about what you don't enjoy. Tell me about what you think your biggest strengths are. All those sorts of questions give you a chance to listen to them talk, which is what you're trying to make happen. Once they get done with all that, then if I really think they're a great candidate, then I will give them some sort of hands-on skills test. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be just as simple as, take the top off this condenser and then put it back on again. Just something that has them using tools, and you'll get a really quick sense of whether or not they are confident using tools or not. A lot of people will use the excuse that they're just nervous when you're watching them, and that's understandable, and that's why you don't want to give them a terribly complicated task to do. But you and I both know that if you're a skilled tradesperson, taking a panel off and putting it back on, or testing a capacitor or something like that, can be done relatively easily. Make sure that they're going to wear proper PPE and that you're over the top careful with this, because again, most of you don't have insurance that's going to cover you giving a skills test to somebody coming in. So, be careful with that and consult with your insurance company before you take any actions like this. We advocate for just doing very simple and very safe tasks with tools so that you can get a sense of whether or not this person is going to be safe when they get out on the job site. As you can see, it's a multi-tiered process. It's based on listening less than talking. Don't try to sell people on working for you. It's not a good practice. Even if they're super skilled, even if they have a lot of previous experience, they've got to want to work with your organization. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They should want to work at your organization because you should compensate well. You should treat people really well and have a reputation for doing so. And you should take training really seriously. And if you do those things, along with benefits and whatever else you've got to offer, you're generally going to be an attractive organization. In terms of attracting some top talent as far as technicians, the thing that I find attracts top technicians more than anything else is that they get to work with other really great people. They don't have to take all the super hard work because there's nobody else talented to support them. So having an organization with talented people tends to bring in more talented people. Think about things like the quality of the work vehicles. Things like tool funds are real big motivators for technicians. It's an area that we're continuing to grow in. You control your hours, have a really good on-call schedule that's not too difficult for technicians to maintain, as well as a family life. Give people an opportunity to do a really good job, but also have a personal life. And you're going to find that you attract better people and also keep more good people. None of us are perfect at it in this trade. It is a challenging trade in terms of hours and schedules and all that stuff. So it is something that has to be managed. But you'll find one of the best ways to get good people is to keep good people. If you keep good people, you're going to be able to attract more good people and grow your organization organically that way. So hopefully you found that helpful for both applicants and people hiring. And thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to be notified when new videos come out. HVAC School is far more than a YouTube channel. You can find out more by going to hvacrschool.com, which is our website and hub for all of our content, including tech tips, videos, podcasts, and so much more. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app of your choosing. You can also join our Facebook group if you want to weigh in on the conversation yourself. Thanks again for watching.